In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God. Christos Anesti. If you were to ask me, brothers and sisters, what is the main problem which troubles, let's say, not the world, but let's narrow it down to the first world countries. What is the biggest problem that troubles us as a first world country? And we can think of a lot of things, but I think the worst and greatest issue which is troubling us today as a first world country, and any other first world country, is the issue of loneliness. It's something which is, to our logic, very strange, and yet something which we come across all the time. And especially as us priests, I think it surprises us how often and how common this sense of loneliness is amongst the people today. And out of all ages, not just old, not just middle-aged, but also young people who say one thing, and that is that they feel alone, that they feel like they don't have anyone. And we ask ourselves, why? Why in a country and in a society that has absolutely everything, which has every single material need that we desire, and everything on our fingertips, why do we feel so alone? And we hear this echo of loneliness from today's gospel reading, from the person who was lying by the sheep pool, by a certain pool, there paralyzed, unable to walk. And he was waiting there for the water to be stirred, because as the scriptures tell us, whenever this water was stirred and someone fell in it, an angel would stir the water and someone fell in it, then they were healed. And so this man who was a paralytic was lying by this pool, the sheep pool, and waiting for the water to be stirred so that he could throw himself in, so that he could fall in and therefore be healed. And this person waited not 1 or 2 or 3 years. The scripture tells us that he was there and he was waiting for 38 years. He was lying by this pool for 38 years. What happened for 38 years? Was the water not stirred? Was no one ever cured? They were. And we receive the answer of why he was there for 38 years. And had it moved from there and waited for the water to be stirred, when Jesus asks him a simple question. A simple, and yet we could consider maybe in a bit of an offensive question. Jesus comes to him, sees his pain, and knowing that Jesus, being the one who reads the hearts and minds of all of us, goes directly to this person, not to anyone else. And he asks him plain and simply, do you want to be made well? Any one of us would think that this is a very ironic question. Of course he wants to be made well. Why else would he be lying there by the sheep pool for all this time? But the response of this man who is paralyzed is even more astounding. And it's a very mature response. The response is, I have no one. I have no one to put me in the pool at the stirring of the water. That was his response. Jesus asks him, does he want to be made well? And the response of the man is, I am alone. I have no one. And that's the response of a lot of us today. Many of us who are seeking, who are looking, who want to find, who want to be fulfilled, Many of us have the same voice and the voice of the paralyzed man coming from within us saying, I am alone, I have no one. And we ask ourselves, why? We know in this situation that Christ came and he visited the one who had no one, because Christ is the fulfillment. Christ tells us in the scriptures that he is everything to everyone, and he is everything that we absolutely need. That's why Jesus used a lot of the times metaphors to describe who he was. They weren't just fancy things. In other words, he says, I am the bread of life. I am the bread of life. He refers to himself as a piece of bread. What do we do when we're hungry? We take something and we eat. Regardless of if it's bread, regardless of if it's KFC, I don't know. We take and we eat so that we can satisfy our hunger. And he says, I am the bread of life. He says, I am the true vine. He says, I am the way. He says, I am the life. He says, I am the truth. He says, I am the Alpha and the Omega. In other words, he says, I am the beginning and the end. But I think most importantly, he says to us on the night when he was speaking to his disciples, he says, I don't call you servants. I no longer call you servants, because a servant doesn't know what his master is doing. I call you friends. Jesus calls us his friends. And a friend is someone who is what? Someone who is there for the other person. Someone who is there to be with them in their joyous times, in their difficult times, in their sad times. A friend is someone who becomes a pillar for someone else. Someone who journeys with someone else in this life. That is what a friend is. And all of us, in one way or another, are in need of a friend. Who can say that we don't need friends? Who can say that we don't need family? Who can say that we don't need our mother, our father, a brother, a sister, someone, a companion? No one can say that. No one. Even the most secluded person cannot say that they do not need a companion in their life. And this has been shown to us in the history of the church through the holy saints, who together they worked for their salvation. The question is, who do we choose as our companion? Who is the one who is accompanying us on the road to salvation? Who is the one who is binding us with Christ, the Christ whom we supposedly call our friend, the one who walks with us in this journey of life and helps us carry our cross? A lot of the times we try to fulfill our loneliness with even more loneliness. A lot of the times we try to fill our loneliness with even more superficial things, things that a lot of the times become even vanity. A lot of the times, because we're lonely, we do things without even realizing how vain they actually are. And if you want me to prove my point, all you have to do, if you have today's modern means, is look at Facebook. And that's why I got rid of things like Facebook and Instagram a long time ago, because I realized how lonely people actually are. They're so lonely that they feel like they need to post pictures of themselves. They're so lonely that they feel like they need to tell the entire world everywhere and every place that they are and what they're doing. They're so lonely that their loneliness is based on how many times this button like is pushed and what comments we receive under the certain photos that we receive. And that satisfies us, or rather supposedly satisfies us. And if anything, it leaves us with an emptiness. And these are the modern means of our communication. And I say many times, God forbid. Not to say that it's totally bad, but I'm saying a lot of the times we rely on satisfying or filling ourselves spiritually with these kind of material needs, which in actual fact, they leave us absolutely empty. They leave us craving for more and more, and all we do is fill ourselves with emptiness. It's basically what we're trying to do is take a bag and fill it with air as much as we can. As much as we try to fill an open bag with air, it's not going to be full. And Jesus comes and he visits us in our loneliness, and he asks us one simple question: do you want to be healed? And the question is absolutely important, because there are people who want to be healed and there are people who don't want to be healed. There are people who are satisfied in their, I'm not going to say satisfied in their loneliness, but think they can be fulfilled in their loneliness. And all they do is continue to fill themselves with things which are worse and worse. And what do? We become isolated. One of the most surprising things for me is seeing how high the suicide rate is in first world countries. And let me tell you, it's much higher than in third world countries. In countries where you would think, yes, you have an excuse to take your own life, even though there is no excuse for someone to take their own life, you did it. You did it because you lived in poverty. You did it because you live in violence. You did it because you've seen so much in your life and you took your life. But the highest suicide rates are in first world countries. And what surprises me even more is that a lot of these people are famous people. Who would have thought that actors like Robbie Williams would have taken their own life? We saw him, we loved his movies, we laughed with him. We did everything. He had fame, he had success, he had money, he had everything. So then what's the reason of why you're taking your own life? Who would have thought people like Bill Cosby now would have been in the situation that they're in? Trial, found guilty for what? For sexual assault in his old age. He's 80-something years old. And we grew up with people like this. We watched them on television. We thought they were great. We saw them as role models. We laughed with them. And yet, they are in the situation that they are today. Why? Because although on the surface or on the outside, everything seems so good, everything seems great and what we want, inside there's an emptiness. Inside there is a darkness. Hence why Jesus comes and tells us again, I am the light. I have come to illumine the darkness of your soul and of your spirit. Regardless of who you are, regardless of how wealthy or poor you are, regardless of how educated or uneducated you are, regardless of how old you are, I am your friend, I am there for you, and I'm here to illumine the darkness of your soul. And he asks us, and I repeat, do you want to be healed? Our answer, brothers and sisters, should be yes. But if we say, Christ, yes, I want to be healed, then it means that I leave aside the things that I feel like are going to fill my heart, and I put you in the primary position of my heart, so that you can show me how to work, so that you can fill my soul and my heart with your divine love and mercy. Amen.